Thank you very much, Kathy. Well, it's just been over 3 months since the provinces of Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal were engulfed in violent unrest and looting that resulted in over 300 lives being lost and over 50 billion rand damage to the country's GDP. Today, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, including its development finance partners, the NEF and the IDC, said they have been able to disperse 1.5 billion rand in relief for businesses affected by the July unrest. Joining us now is IDC CEO Mr. Tshokolo Nchocho to give us more details about the work that they've done. Mr. Nchocho, 1.5 billion rand dispersed thus far. How much of this is in the form of grants and how much in the form of loans?
Good evening, Xolani, and thank you very much for the opportunity. I would be able to give the accurate numbers from the IDC side. The total that we set aside, if I may start there, as the IDC was a total of 1.5 billion rand, the IDC alone. And of that amount, 700 million rand was set aside as pure grant money, and the rest of the 800 million would be considered as debt instrument on a very concessionary basis of 5%. So from the IDC side, of that 1.5 billion rand figure that the minister talked about, we have approved just over 1.1 billion rand from the IDC. And of that 1.1 billion rand total, we have already disbursed, paid out just over 700 million rand, just to get the numbers right. And a substantial portion of it, indeed, probably about 70% or so of it, is in the form of concessionary debt instruments, and the rest is these grants. Because the way we work is that we blend the money. Nobody can come for a grant alone. So we blend the debt as well as the debt as well as the grant portion.
Mr. Nchocho, what types of businesses are we talking about here that have been supported by the IDC, judging by the applications for relief? And also, which ones between KZN and Gauteng do you think was worse off in the unrest that took place?
Yeah, this was one of those very unfortunate incidents. And indeed, between ourselves as the IDC, the Department of Trade and Industry, and other agencies of government did an impact survey of what happened throughout the country. So from the IDC side, what we discovered was that businesses were impacted mainly across the board. We have businesses. The obvious ones are the retailers that we all saw on television being raided. Then there were clothing and textile manufacturers, a lot of them in the KZN area, who were also affected adversely by the unrests. Then a lot of logistics companies that are responsible for moving different categories of cargo that move between mainly the ports down in the coast up to the main economic hub in Johannesburg. So logistics companies. Then one thing that I didn't expect, Xolani, there were also sugarcane growers, small and medium-sized, majority black-owned sugarcane growers, whose fields were also burned in the KZN area. Up here in Gauteng, interestingly, small-owned businesses that are community pharmacies. We were surprised. Pharmacies also looted, people taking medicine and things like that. So the impact was largely across the board. As I say, I'm not talking about the retailers that we all saw being so adversely affected. We had a chemicals company in KZN area which was also affected. So across the board. Look, in terms of the split between KZN and Gauteng, I think in numeric terms, more businesses were affected in the KZN area than in the Gauteng area. I don't have the exact values in terms of the rand value estimates, but KZN was severely affected, I think much more than the Gauteng province.
Let's talk about supply chain, which was also severely disrupted, and we've seen jobs that have been impacted as well. But this relief also sustained thousands of jobs. Talk to us about that.
That was probably the single most important consideration why this intervention was put in place. I mean, when we all go back and we listened to the leadership of the country, talking to various people who unfortunately had gotten themselves involved in this social unrest. A lot of them were people, let's be honest, who were on the vulnerable end of society, unemployed and so on, lacking access to economic opportunities and so on. So right from the beginning, the inspiration behind embarking on this very rapid assistance program was to restore businesses back to operations so that people could be rehired back. Because think about it, when even larger numbers of people are sitting out unemployed, it only compounds the social risk that we saw manifest during that period in July. So from the IDC side, it's based on the approved numbers up to now, it's just over 23,000 jobs that have since been restored. The various companies are at various points of recovery. What I mean is it is relatively easy to restore a pharmacy because maybe it is about putting back the installations inside and restocking it. But it is a little bit more difficult to restore a manufacturing plant somewhere which has been destroyed because new equipment still has to be installed and commissioned and so on and so on. But a lot of our business partners, the customers, are on their way to recovery, and a substantial number of jobs, as they reported today during the seminar, have already been recovered.
You've approved a substantial amount, a percentage of funds, but interestingly also, you seconded your own employees to support businesses administratively. Let's talk about some of these concerns that we've heard from the reaction from today's briefing, that some of the mom and pop shops, those small independent shops that were impacted, people who are independent, who are not part of any large chains, may have fallen through the cracks. How many of those independent businesses are you considering?
Yes, that's an important question. In fact, as part of that grant portion of the IDC's allocation, we deliberately said the independent retailers, the majority of which are around townships, those would largely be grant funded. That butchery at the corner, which people unfortunately overran and destroyed and so on. So it is a total of just over 100 million rand that we have approved in this particular category. A lot of the transactions in this category are smaller amounts, 500,000 here, 1 million here, 1.5 million here, up to 2 million, because that is the scale of the shops. But the difference that they make is incredible in terms of impact on life. And yes, you're right. The modus operandi here was that our officials had to get into the vehicles. We did so together with them, drove around the streets from corner to corner, but also working in partnership with the industry associations. People are organized. This either be it the informal traders organization or the association of hawkers and so on and so on. So they are organized, so we were able to get to them through these organized structures. And by the way, the program has not come to an end just because we gave this update today. we continue to do the assessments, and I can give you the numbers. I mean, as of today, we have just over 600 million, 608 to be exact, of applications that we are busy evaluating. They are in the due diligence phase, as we call it, as we say in banking language. And there is a further 320 million worth of applications that we have received that are in the screening phase. So we are looking through them to see if they meet the basic criteria. And by the way, as you'll recall maybe, Xolani, the criteria were very simple. It was, one, has the business been adversely affected by the riots? Can we demonstrate adverse effects? Two, it is a legally registered, a legal business. It's not an illegal activity. And three, the owner of the business or the owners of the business indeed have the intent to restore it. So we wouldn't fund the business which somebody was winding down and saying, no, I'm closing it. So legal, adversely affected, and had good prospects of recovery. Then we would look into it, and we continue to look into those applications now.
Mr. Tshokolo Nchocho, the IDC CEO, thank you very much for your time there, giving us an update on the work that they have been doing as the IDC to revive the businesses that were impacted adversely from the July unrest.